Hi everyone, Drew with Dru Talks here. Today we're going to talk about homeschooling. And the reason we're going to talk about it is because it has kind of become a hot item or topic, whether you want it to be or not. This last year, everyone ended up having to homeschool against their will. And then this upcoming year, a lot of people are considering continuing it. So it should be interesting to see what happens. So I wanted to talk about it because it's a subject I am very, very, very familiar with. I was homeschooled up through 8th grade, and then I entered the public school system as a freshman, and I also homeschool my children. So let's begin. Here's my story. My parents homeschooled in the early 90s, and at that time, not a whole lot of people were doing it. So picture in your head a stereotypical homeschool family. Be really kind of critical, and that is probably what my family would look like to you. We lived in the country. We were isolated. Honestly, my family was pretty dysfunctional, and we didn't do our work all the time because nobody was checking on us. Now, all that being said, we've just laid out a very, very negative view of homeschooling. All that being said, when I went into the public school system in my freshman year, I was still leaps and bounds ahead of my public school peers. I had already learned the things they are learning, and I wasn't even doing homeschool correctly, quote unquote. So even with an incredibly negative experience academically, I was still ahead of the game. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know why it is that homeschool kids score higher on average on their ACTs and SATs than their public school peers. That is a statistical fact. They score higher on those, and they find it incredibly easy to get into college because of that. Now, I don't know why that is. And once again, I am not trying to bash on public schools. I had a great high school public school experience. But because of my bad experience homeschooling, I wasn't going to homeschool. And I actually did because my husband, who was publicly educated all the way through, he had a lot of trauma that happened to him through the public education system. He was horribly bullied because his family was very, very poor. And he also academically struggled. In fact, I think as an adult, he pretty much retaught himself how to read. So his experience and going through that, he really wanted better for his children. So he's the one who pushed for us to try homeschooling. And so we did, and I'm really, really grateful that we did. Now, let me talk about a few differences I see between public school children and homeschool children. And once again, I just want to make it clear, I am not bashing on public school, but I am going to point out some positives to homeschooling for people to consider who are thinking of doing this next year. Now, one of the main arguments you get about homeschooling is say, well, maybe academically they do better, but man, they're socially awkward. And I know that because I met somebody who was homeschooled once and they were weird. Well, I'm going to be honest. I have met some people who are homeschooled who are weird, but I have met probably more people who were public schooled that are weird. And I'm just going to say, I don't think you can say the whole group of people is weird because you know somebody who is. I'm just going to say that I think weirdos run in every group. I think that's really what we're seeing. And especially now, homeschooling has become kind of hot. There's a lot of people who are doing it. And so the socialization is no longer an issue because your kids are going to be involved in so many activities and group things with other homeschool families that they will be perfectly fine. And out of all the kids I know who were formerly homeschooled and are adults now, I'm going to say you will not be able to tell the difference between them or a public school kid on the surface. There isn't this huge off-putting social awkwardness. So we're just going to debunk that myth that we need to socialize our children through the public school system. You know, I believe we educate our children and we socialize our pets. That's what I think. But we're going to move on from there. So let me talk about homeschool kids as far as differences from the public school kids. So I have taught public school children in classes, and I have taught homeschool children. One of the very, very marked differences that I see, and I'm not going to say this for everybody because everybody is an individual, but there is a marked difference between the enthusiasm of the homeschool kids and the enthusiasm of the public school kids. Teaching public school kids, they sit back in their chair, they kind of grunt at you, and they honestly don't want to think something is cool or exciting unless they know it's okay with their peers for them to think it's cool and exciting. Homeschool kids are like, oh, I'm so excited to be here, and let's build a replica of Narnia with popsicle sticks, and let's play this game, and oh, you're new, come into our group and be friends with us. That is more of what you're going to see with the homeschool kids, and it makes them so incredibly fun to teach. There is like an energy there, and they're not worried about not looking cool, so they don't have this awkward kind of hands crossed, I don't want to do something wrong because I'm going to get ostracized for it. Homeschool kids are not used to being ostracized for stuff, so they are just enthusiastic. And I find it charming, and I think it prolongs childhood a little bit, which would be nice for a lot of our children. They don't need to grow up super fast. Also, these kids that come out of homeschool communities, sometimes people seem to think that fundamentalist religious people homeschool their kids so they won't think for themselves. However, I am discovering that the opposite is actually true. Kids that come out of homeschool communities, oftentimes their parents are free thinkers, and that's the whole reason they ended up homeschooling, and they raise children that are free thinkers. And sometimes children that are coming out of the public school system are taught to just follow what we tell you to do and do it and pass the test. So when this whole crisis happened this year, the year of crisis 2020, every single person I knew who had been formerly homeschooled, who was an adult now, they were like, wait a second, I want some information. I want to know why this is happening. They question the narrative. They question it because they want to actually know what's going on. They're not afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to be critical thinkers. These are the kind of kids that are produced from the homeschool communities. They are less likely to be like, well, whatever they say, I'm just going to do. Okay? They are not obedient little drones that just go along and do what they're told. Also, one thing that I do appreciate about the homeschool community is there isn't a ton of pressure on children to identify different things about who they are and then take that on as their whole identity. I feel like in public schools, there was an idea of collectivism where you had to identify stuff and that was just who you were. So I'm going to use this as an example. If you were a kid or a teenager, the pressure is identify your sexual orientation, and then that's who you are. So if you identify as being gay, then your entire identity is, well, you're that gay person. You're a gay man. That is your whole identity. And the problem with this collectivism is putting people into boxes and saying, any part of who you are, well, that just encompasses your whole identity. There isn't any more to you than that. So are you a jock? Well, then you're a jock. That's who you are. You're in that box. You're going to do whatever a jock does. Or are you a nerd? Well, then you're in the nerd box. And that's why we see the formation of cliques in the public school systems. This idea that collectively Once you identify as something, you are in that box, and that is your whole identity. You don't have any other aspects to your identity. That is it. It's collectivism. You're not like an individual who may have one thing that's part of their identity, but there's also all these other parts that make up who you are. Instead, you're like, nope, you're Asian American. You're in that box. Nope. Your gender is, you've identified this gender. There's the pressure to identify gender now. So you're in that box. And they don't let you be, the attitude of the state, it doesn't let you be all these things or think differently. Once you're in that box, everything about that is your identity, And I don't like that. I don't like that pressure on children. Because the thing about individuals is there's so much that encompasses who we are. We can't take one part of our identity and say, this is all of who I am. That I'm not any of these other things. This is who I am. So I don't think that collectivism is fair to children. And I didn't mean to go on about that for so long. But I feel like it is dangerous. What we are expecting kids to do at such a young age is to identify who you are, and then that is who you are, and you can't be anything else. So I don't like that. That is not something you see in the homeschool community. People are more individuals. We are not in boxes. And it is probably one of my primary reasons for homeschooling. I originally said I would never homeschool out of fear, but then as I've watched things happen, it's made me more grateful that my children are at home. I don't like that in the public school system, the kids are there and none of the adults are armed. I know that sounds extreme, but if a shooter came into my school, the teacher is armed and she will defend these children with her life. We will not be hiding in the closet waiting for help to come. Okay? I never thought that would be a reason to homeschool, but the last few years, it's kind of terrifying what's happening to society as it morally falls apart. Now, one thing that has concerned me, I read online somewhere, and I have no idea if this is true because it seemed outlandish to me, that 60% of parents are considering homeschooling their children. That seems like a lot. That is a mass exodus from the public school systems. Now, one thing as a homeschooler I am concerned about is up till this point, we've been nothing more than an annoyance to the Department of Ed because we are such a small fringe group. The percentage of kids that are homeschooled in this country is astronomically small compared to the children who are in the public system. If that many people pull their kids out of the public school system, we are going to go from being a small fringe annoyance to a threat. And I do not know if the system is going to handle losing that kind of funding. So right now, the school system makes, I don't know, on average, like maybe $11,000 per kid per year in elementary grades. And that's just a guess. If 60% of their students are gone, and that's an outlandish number, I don't know if it'll happen, I think the homeschool community is going to get a lot of pushback. Teachers' unions are not going to want to see that happen. The Department of Ed's not going to want to see that happen because that is a lot of funding leaving this public system. So, that being said, get ready for some legislation that may try to pass coming down on homeschoolers a little bit. I hope not, but the conspiracy theory and theorist in me wonders. So this year I did join the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. You pay $125 and they'll walk you through what you need to do to legally homeschool. Also, they will protect you if the state tries to come down on you for doing it. $125 for a year. They're a nonprofit. And I know a lot of families that are part of it. And so it just gives me peace of mind. So I'll put the link in the description for that as well. And anyway, that's all I wanted to address today. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them in the comments, like this video, share it. And yeah,